Ambassador Zethkar had lived for 3 centuries, witnessed the rise and fall of 7 civilizations, and negotiated peace treaties that saved billions of lives. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the moment he watched a human mother sing a lullaby to her child while loading ammunition into a plasma rifle. That was the day he realized the galaxy's greatest fear wasn't some cosmic horror from the void, wasn't the mechanical precision of the synthetics, or even the psychic storms of the ethereals. It was the quiet determination in a human's eyes when they decided something needed protecting. The other species called them the sleeping giants. They thought it was because humans seemed peaceful, almost naive in their diplomatic approaches. They were wrong. Humans were sleeping giants because when they finally woke up to war, they didn't just fight, they transformed the very concept of warfare itself. This is the story of how I learned why the galaxy trembles when humanity goes to war. And why, after witnessing their fury unleashed, I finally understood that the universe's greatest mercy was that humans preferred peace. The Galactic Council chambers hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 species gathered for what many believed would be humanity's final diplomatic meeting. Ambassador Zethkar adjusted his ceremonial robes, the crystalline threads catching the artificial starlight that bathed the massive amphitheater. In his 300 years of service, he had never seen such tension in these hallowed halls. The humans sat in their designated section with characteristic calm. Ambassador Sarah Chen, their lead representative, reviewed her notes with the same methodical precision she had shown for the past 6 months of negotiations. Her aide, Colonel Marcus Webb, maintained the rigid posture that seemed to be standard among their military personnel. What struck Zethkar most was their composure. Every other species in the chamber showed signs of stress. Flickering skin patterns, elevated pheromone releases, rapid gill movements, anxious chittering. The humans simply sat and waited. The hegemony delegation occupied the central platform, their imposing figures casting long shadows across the chamber floor. General Vrakthar, their supreme military commander, stood nearly 4 meters tall, his exoskeleton polished to a mirror shine that reflected the fear in every other delegate's eyes. The hegemony had conquered 17 systems in the past 2 years, their advance seemingly unstoppable. They had given humanity an ultimatum: surrender their outer colonies or face total annihilation. Chancellor Mordek called the session to order, his voice amplified across the chamber through universal translators. We gather today to hear humanity's response to the hegemony's final terms. Ambassador Chen, you have the floor. Sarah Chen rose slowly, her movements deliberate and measured. She was unremarkable by human standards, average height, graying hair pulled back in a simple style, wearing the same navy blue diplomatic uniform she had worn to every session. But as she walked to the central podium, Zethkar noticed something that made his scales prickle with unease. Her eyes held the same expression he had seen in Predators just before they struck. Honored delegates, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. For 6 months we have sat in these chambers and listened to demands, threats, and ultimatums. We have watched as the hegemony has burned worlds, enslaved populations, and spread terror across the galaxy. We have remained patient, hoping that wisdom would prevail, that peace could be maintained. General Vrakthar's mandibles clicked in what Zethkar recognized as amusement. Your patience is weakness, human. Your hope is delusion. We have given you terms that are generous, considering your species' inferior status. Surrender your colonies, and we will allow your homeworld to continue its pitiful existence under our protection. Chen turned to face the hegemon delegation directly. You mistake our restraint for weakness. That is an error that more powerful species than yours have made before. A ripple of whispers spread through the chamber. The Vorfak delegates' tentacles writhed nervously. The crystalline Siltharians dimmed their natural luminescence. Even the cybernetic nexus representatives seemed to process this statement with unusual intensity. Prakthar's exoskeleton plates shifted, a sign of rising anger. You dare compare your pathetic species to powers greater than ours? We have conquered races that had mastered space travel before your ancestors crawled from their caves. We have destroyed fleets that numbered in the thousands. What could humans possibly do that we have not already faced and overcome? Chen smiled, and Zethkar felt a chill run through his core temperature regulators. It was not a pleasant expression. You want to know what makes humans different? Chen's voice remained calm, conversational even. Every species you've conquered fought you with the expectation of victory. They went to war believing they could win through superior technology, better tactics, or sheer numbers. When they realized they were losing, they surrendered to preserve what they could. She paused, letting her words sink in. Humans don't fight to win, General. We fight to survive. And when we fight to survive, we don't care about victory or defeat. We don't care about honor or glory. We care only about ensuring that whatever threatens our existence pays such a terrible price that the survivors remember for generations why you don't threaten humanity. The chamber fell silent. Zefka could hear his own heart beating in the stillness. Colonel Webb stood and handed Chen a datapad. She glanced at it briefly before continuing. 3 days ago, you attacked the human colony of New Haven. You killed 47,000 civilians, including children in their schools and patients in their hospitals. You did this to demonstrate your power, to show us the futility of resistance. Vrakthar's posture straightened with pride. Indeed, it was a masterful demonstration of our capabilities. Your colonists died knowing their government's stubbornness was responsible for their fate. Chen nodded slowly. Yes, they did die knowing that. But they also died knowing something else. They died knowing that humanity had already decided what our response would be. She touched the datapad, and the chamber's central holographic display activated. A star map appeared, showing the hegemony's territory in stark red, human space in blue, and the vast neutral zones between them in grey. You see, General, while you were congratulating yourself on murdering civilians, we were already moving. 60 hours ago, the human fleet completed the largest strategic deployment in our history. Not to defend our colonies, but to ensure that every hegemony world pays for what you did to New Haven. The map began to change. Blue indicators appeared throughout hegemony space, not at the borders where defensive fleets might be expected, but deep within their territory, surrounding their most important worlds. Vrakthar's mandibles spread wide in shock. Impossible. Our monitoring stations would have detected such a massive fleet movement. Chen's smile widened. Your monitoring stations did detect it. Unfortunately, they're no longer functional. Along with your communication relays, your supply depots, and approximately 60% of your border patrol fleets. Delegates leapt to their feet, voices raised in multiple languages as translators struggled to keep up with the cacophony of questions and exclamations. Chancellor Mordek banged his ceremonial gavel repeatedly. Order! Order in the chamber! When the noise finally subsided, Vrakthar's voice came out as a dangerous hiss. You're bluffing. Even if you could have moved forces without our knowledge, the logistics alone would be impossible. You're talking about coordinated attacks across hundreds of light years. Chen turned back to the holographic display. Show them the timeline. The display zoomed in on individual systems, showing timestamps and casualty reports. Mining stations going dark. Communication hubs falling silent. Military outposts reporting contact before their transmissions cut off abruptly. Phase 1 began 72 hours ago, Chen explained, her voice taking on the tone of a military briefing. Small hunter-killer teams using modified civilian vessels infiltrated your border regions. Their targets were infrastructure, communications, sensors, supply lines. Not particularly glamorous work, but it created the perfect cover for Phase 2. The display showed larger fleet movements, human ships emerging from previously uncharted hyperspace routes. While you were focused on the border skirmishes, our main battle groups used routes through dark space that we've been mapping for the past 50 years. Not the fastest way to travel, but completely undetectable by conventional sensors. Vrakthar's exoskeleton began to show stress fractures along the edges. You've been planning this for 50 years? Longer, actually. We started planning for this war the day we made first contact with the hegemony. We hoped we'd never need these plans, but we're very thorough about preparing for worst-case scenarios. The display now showed the current state of hegemony space. Red zones indicated worlds under human attack or blockade. Yellow zones showed areas where human forces were in position but had not yet engaged. Phase 3 begins in 18 hours, Chen continued. That's when we start the systematic elimination of every hegemony military installation, government facility, and industrial complex in your territory. Your civilian populations will be given the opportunity to evacuate, but your ability to wage war will cease to exist. The Siltharian delegate pulsed with rapid light patterns. Ambassador Chen, such widespread destruction would constitute genocide on a galactic scale. Chen turned to face the concerned delegate. No, it would constitute the complete military defeat of an aggressor species that chose to murder human children. We're not targeting civilians. We're targeting the hegemony's capacity to continue this war. Every military installation, every shipyard, every weapons factory, every command center. When we're finished, the hegemony will be incapable of threatening anyone ever again. Vrakthar's composure finally cracked. You cannot do this. The galactic community will not stand for such aggression. The galactic community, Chen said quietly, has stood by and watched you conquer and enslave 17 civilizations. The galactic community has offered thoughts and prayers and diplomatic protests while you burned worlds. The galactic community has demonstrated that it is either unwilling or unable to stop you. She gestured toward the assembled delegates. So humanity will stop you. Alone if necessary. The Nexus representative's optical sensors focused on Chen with mechanical precision. The computational requirements for coordinating such an operation would be staggering. How did you achieve the necessary strategic synchronization across such vast distances? Chen glanced at Colonel Webb, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. That's the thing about humans, Chen said. We don't just prepare for war, we excel at it. Every human child learns about famous military campaigns from our history. Every human student studies logistics, strategy, and tactical coordination. Every human citizen understands that peace is only maintained through the credible threat of overwhelming force. She touched the data pad again, and the display changed to show detailed schematics of human military technology. While other species focused on advancing their civilian technologies, we spent equal effort improving our military capabilities. While other species sought to avoid conflict through diplomacy alone, we prepared for the day when diplomacy would fail. We hoped that day would never come, but we were ready when it did. The schematics showed weapon systems that made several delegates step backward in alarm. Starships with firepower ratings that exceeded anything in known space. Orbital bombardment platforms capable of sterilizing entire continents. Automated defense networks that could operate independently for decades. We call it the doctrine of overwhelming response, Chen explained. The idea is simple. If you threaten human lives, we will respond with such disproportionate force that every potential aggressor in the galaxy will spend the next 1,000 years remembering why that was a mistake. Vrakthar's voice came out as a whisper. You're monsters. Chen's expression didn't change. We're survivors. And we're parents. And we're citizens of worlds where children should be able to go to school without wondering if today is the day some alien empire decides to make an example of them. She walked closer to the hegemony delegation.
You made this choice, General.
You chose to attack civilians. You chose to murder children. You chose to bet that humans would accept your terms rather than fight. That was your mistake. The chamber fell silent again as Chen returned to her place at the podium. I'm authorized to offer the hegemony one final chance for negotiation. Withdraw from all conquered territories. Submit to war crimes tribunals for your leadership. Accept permanent demilitarization under galactic supervision. Do this within the next 18 hours, and we will abort Phase 3. Vraktar straightened to his full height. The hegemony does not negotiate with inferior species. We do not bow to threats from mammals who have barely left their homeworld. We will crush your fleets and turn your worlds to glass. Chen nodded as if she had expected this response. Colonel Webb, please transmit the authorization codes. Webb worked quickly at his portable console. Codes transmitted, Ambassador. All battle groups are now free to engage at will. The holographic display updated in real time, showing human fleets beginning their attacks across hegemony space. Red indicators began flashing as military installations went offline one by one. It's begun, Chen announced. In 72 hours, the hegemony will no longer exist as a military threat to anyone. Their worlds will remain inhabited, their people will survive, but their capacity for conquest will be permanently eliminated. She looked around the chamber at the stunned faces of the galactic community. This is what happens when humanity goes to war. We don't fight for territory or resources or glory. We fight to ensure that the threats to our existence are eliminated so thoroughly that they can never threaten us again. The display showed the scope of the human operation. Thousands of ships, millions of personnel, all moving with clockwork precision toward targets throughout hegemony space. It was a demonstration of military planning and execution on a scale that no one in the chamber had thought possible. Questions? Chen asked politely. In the stunned silence that followed, Zethkar finally understood why the galaxy's ancient records spoke of humanity with such fear. It wasn't their technology or their numbers that made them dangerous. It was their complete unwillingness to accept any threat to their survival, combined with their terrifying competence at turning that refusal into military action. As the reports continued to stream in from across the galaxy, showing hegemony positions falling one after another with mechanical inevitability, One thought echoed through Zethkar's mind: thank the stars that humans preferred peace. Because when they chose war, they didn't just win. They ended the ability of their enemies to ever threaten anyone again. The war room aboard the human flagship Indomitable hummed with controlled activity as Admiral Elena Vasquez reviewed the tactical displays showing the ongoing dismantling of the hegemony war machine. 48 hours had passed since Ambassador Chen's declaration, and the results were beyond even her most optimistic projections. Zethkar stood beside her, granted unprecedented access to observe human military operations in action. What he witnessed challenged every assumption the galaxy held about warfare itself. "Admiral, we have confirmation from Battle Group 7, reported Communications Officer Park, her voice crisp and professional. The hegemony shipyards at Kethmore are secured. Resistance was minimal after their defense platforms were neutralized." Vasquez nodded, her attention focused on the holographic display that showed real-time updates from across 17 star systems. Casualties? Minimal on our side. 4 wounded, no fatalities. Hegemony losses are approximately 1,200 military personnel, with another 3,000 captured. Zethkar's scales rippled with confusion. "Admiral, forgive my ignorance of human military doctrine, but those numbers seem remarkably low for such a massive operation." Vasquez turned to face the ambassador, her expression thoughtful. "That's by design. When we say we're going to end the hegemony's capacity to wage war, we mean exactly that, not their capacity to exist. Dead soldiers don't learn lessons, but defeated ones do." She gestured to a tactical display showing the hegemony's primary fortress world of Vrakshin, where General Vrakthar's own command structure was located. "Watch this. Battle Group 3 is about to demonstrate what we call precision overwhelming force." The display zoomed in to show the heavily defended world surrounded by orbital defense platforms, shield generators, and the hegemony's most powerful fleet. To Zethkar's eye, it appeared impregnable, layer upon layer of defensive systems that would require months of siege warfare to overcome. "Targets identified and locked," came a voice over the communications array. "All systems show green. Awaiting final authorization." "Authorized," Vasquez replied calmly. "Execute Thunderbolt protocol." What happened next would be burned into Zethkar's memory for the rest of his long life. The human fleet didn't advance toward the defenses in traditional formation. Instead, space itself seemed to tear open, as hundreds of micro-wormholes appeared simultaneously throughout the defensive perimeter. Through each portal came a single human ship, but not where any defender would expect them. The human vessels materialized inside the defensive grid, having bypassed every layer of protection through what Zethkar would later learn was called combat folding. The ability to create precise, short-range spatial distortions that allowed ships to appear exactly where they needed to be. But what stunned him most wasn't the technology itself, but how the humans used it. Each ship targeted exactly one critical system: a shield generator, a command center, a weapons platform, with surgical precision. The attacks weren't designed to kill as many enemies as possible, but to eliminate specific capabilities. Within minutes, the entire defensive network simply stopped functioning, not because it was destroyed, but because its ability to coordinate and communicate had been severed at every critical point. "Fortress Command, this is Admiral Torres aboard the Retribution," came a voice over the tactical display. "Your defensive systems are neutralized. We are prepared to accept your surrender. You have 10 minutes to respond before we begin targeting your military installations directly." Zethkar watched in fascination as the human fleet maintained perfect formation around the fortress world, weapons trained on specific targets but not firing. They simply waited, demonstrating a level of fire discipline that seemed almost unnatural for a species engaged in active warfare. "This is General Korvac, Fortress Commander," came a shaken voice through the communication array. What do you want?" "The immediate surrender of all military forces under your command," Torres responded matter-of-factly. "Lay down your weapons, power down your systems, and prepare to be taken into custody. Any attempt to resist will result in the complete destruction of your military capabilities on this world. And our civilians, our cities, will remain unharmed as long as your military forces comply with surrender terms. We are not here to conquer your world, General. We are here to ensure it can no longer threaten ours." The silence stretched for several long minutes before Korvac's voice returned, heavy with defeat. We surrender. All forces are standing down." Vasquez turned to Zethkar as confirmation of the surrender came through multiple channels. "This is how humans wage war, Ambassador. We don't destroy for the sake of destruction. We eliminate the ability to threaten us while preserving everything else. But how? Zethkar asked, his voice filled with awe. The coordination required for such precise operations across multiple star systems simultaneously, it should be impossible. Chief Strategy Officer Commander Sarah Walsh joined their conversation, her uniform bearing decorations that Zethkar was beginning to recognize as indicators of extraordinary service. It's not impossible if you've spent centuries perfecting the art of military coordination. Every human child grows up playing strategy games. Every human student studies historical military campaigns from Earth's past. Every human citizen understands that the price of peace is eternal vigilance and overwhelming preparedness. She gestured to the tactical displays showing operations across 17 different systems. What you're seeing isn't just technology, Ambassador. It's the culmination of 3,000 years of human military evolution, refined through constant study and preparation for the day we'd need to use it. The display's updated to show the status of human operations galaxy-wide. Zethkar studied the patterns and began to notice something remarkable. Each attack was precisely calibrated not just for military effectiveness, but to send a specific message to other potential aggressors. At the Hegemony Research Facility on Tychron, human forces had captured the weapons laboratories intact, demonstrating their ability to seize enemy technology at will. At the military academy on Sentkar, they had surrounded the complex and waited for evacuation of all students, before disabling the training facilities, showing their commitment to protecting non-combatants even among enemy populations. Most remarkably, at the Hegemony's primary shipyard complex at Morvex, human engineers had actually improved the facility's safety systems while dismantling its military production capabilities, ensuring that the civilian workers who depended on the facility for their livelihoods could continue their lives once the war ended.
You're not just defeating them, Zethkar realized.
You're demonstrating to the entire galaxy that you can defeat anyone, anywhere, anytime, while still maintaining moral principles that other species struggle to uphold even in peacetime. Admiral Vasquez smiled, but it was a weary expression. That's the burden of being human, Ambassador. We could have ended this war in hours by simply destroying every hegemony world from orbit. Our technology would certainly allow it, but that would make us no better than they are. She pointed to a communication from the hegemony world of Kelthar, where local civilian leaders were requesting human assistance in establishing refugee camps for military families whose breadwinners had been captured. Instead, we choose the harder path. We end their ability to threaten us while preserving their ability to grow, to learn, to become something better than what they were. It's more complex, more expensive, and far more dangerous for our own people. But it's the only way to ensure that when this war ends, we'll have peace that actually lasts. Commander Walsh highlighted another display showing psychological analysis reports from captured hegemony personnel. Our behavioral specialists have been conducting interviews with prisoners throughout the operation. What we're finding is fascinating. Most of these soldiers genuinely believed that conquest was the natural order of the universe. They thought every species fought the way they did, with the goal of dominating and enslaving others. She pulled up recorded interviews with captured officers. Zethkar listened as hegemony commanders expressed confusion and disbelief at human military doctrine. They couldn't understand why humans would expend resources protecting enemy civilians, why they would offer medical treatment to wounded prisoners, why they would preserve infrastructure that could be used against them in the future. They're learning that strength isn't about the ability to destroy, Walsh continued. It's about the ability to build something worth protecting. And that lesson will spread throughout their society long after their military is dismantled. A priority alert chimed and Operations Officer Chen stepped forward. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. Chancellor Mordek is requesting immediate communication. Put him through, Vasquez replied. The holographic display shifted to show the council chambers, where delegates from across the galaxy had gathered for an emergency session. Chancellor Mordek's expression was a mixture of relief and apprehension. Admiral Vasquez, the council has been monitoring your operations. We must express our amazement at the scope and precision of your military capabilities. Thank you, Chancellor. Is there something the Council needs? Actually, yes. We've been contacted by 17 different species requesting human military assistance with security concerns. The Vorthak Collective is asking for help dealing with pirates in their outer systems. The Crystalline Confederation wants consultation on defensive strategies. Even the Synthetic Alliance is requesting technical exchanges on non-lethal conflict resolution. Zethkar felt his scales shift color with surprise. In all his years of diplomatic service, he had never seen such a rapid shift in galactic power dynamics. The entire galaxy was suddenly looking to humanity not as a threat, but as a protector. Vasquez's expression grew thoughtful. Chancellor, Humanity appreciates the confidence, but we're not interested in becoming the galaxy's police force. We fought this war to protect our people and to eliminate a specific threat. We have no desire to expand our influence or control other systems. But Admiral, interjected the Nexus representative, your demonstration of precise, overwhelming force has eliminated the primary threat to galactic stability. Surely you understand that nature abhors a vacuum? If humanity doesn't provide leadership, others will fill that role, potentially creating the same problems we just witnessed with the hegemony. Admiral Vasquez looked at her senior staff, then at Zethkar. Ambassador, you've observed our operations for the past 2 days. What do you think? Should humanity accept the role of galactic peacekeeper? Zethkar considered the question carefully. He had watched humans wage war with unprecedented precision and restraint. He had seen them prioritize the protection of non-combatants, even when it increased their own casualties. He had witnessed their commitment to building lasting peace rather than simply achieving victory. Admiral, I believe the question isn't whether humanity should accept that role. The question is whether the galaxy deserves to have humanity accept that role. The council chambers fell silent as delegates absorbed this perspective. What I've observed, Zethkar continued, is that humans don't fight for conquest or dominance. They fight for principles. They fight to protect not just their own people, but the idea that civilized beings should be able to live without fear of aggression. If the galactic community is truly committed to those principles, then perhaps it's time for all of us to learn from the human example. Chancellor Mordek leaned forward. What do you propose, Ambassador Zethkar? I propose that rather than asking humanity to police the galaxy, we ask them to teach the galaxy how to police itself. Human military doctrine, human strategic thinking, human commitment to protecting civilians, these should become galactic standards. Not because humans are superior, but because their methods actually work to create lasting peace. Commander Walsh stepped into the communication field. The ambassador raises an interesting point. We've always been willing to share defensive technologies and strategies with species that demonstrate genuine commitment to peaceful coexistence. What we will not do is provide military capability to species that might use it for aggression. But how would you determine which species qualify? Asked the Siltharian representative. Admiral Vasquez smiled. The same way we determined that the hegemony didn't qualify. We watch how they treat their own people, their neighbors, and those who are weaker than themselves. Species that protect civilians, respect sovereignty, and resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than force. Those species are natural allies for humanity. The communication continued for another hour, with representatives from dozens of species requesting information about human defensive strategies, conflict resolution protocols, and peacekeeping methodologies. Zethkar found himself serving as an informal interpreter, helping other delegates understand the human perspective on warfare and peace. As the session finally ended, Admiral Vasquez turned to Zethkar with a serious expression. Ambassador, I want you to understand something important. What you've witnessed isn't humanity at our most dangerous. This was humanity showing restraint. Our true military capabilities are significantly beyond what we've demonstrated in this conflict. Zethkar felt a chill run through his core temperature regulators. You mean this overwhelming display of force was actually restrained? Completely. We could have ended this war in hours using weapon systems we haven't revealed to the galactic community. We chose not to because the galaxy isn't ready for that level of technology. Instead, we used conventional weapons and tactics, just applied with unprecedented precision and coordination. She gestured to the tactical display still showing the systematic dismantling of hegemony military capabilities. This was a message, Ambassador. A demonstration that humanity can protect what we value while maintaining the principles we believe in. But it was also a warning that there are lines that should never be crossed.
Such as? Any threat to human civilian populations? Will trigger a response that makes this operation look like a police action.
Any attempt to develop weapons of mass destruction directed at human worlds will result in the complete elimination of that threat, regardless of diplomatic consequences. Any species that chooses to emulate the hegemony's approach to galactic relations will discover why the ancient records speak of humanity with such fear. As Zethkar absorbed this information, he realized that the galaxy had just witnessed something unprecedented, a species demonstrating the ability to wage war with overwhelming force while maintaining moral principles that elevated rather than degraded civilization itself. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy would learn from this example, or force humanity to provide more direct lessons in the consequences of aggression. Looking at the efficiency and precision with which human forces continued their operations, Zethkar found himself hoping that the galaxy would choose wisdom, because if they chose otherwise, he had seen enough to know that humanity's restraint would not last forever. 6 months after the fall of the hegemony, Zethkar found himself standing in what had once been the most feared fortress in the galaxy. The former hegemony command center on Vrakshen had been transformed into something unprecedented, a joint rehabilitation and education facility where former military personnel learned civilian occupations while their families received support in transitioning to peaceful society. What struck him most profoundly was the sight of human engineers working alongside former hegemony soldiers to build new infrastructure. Schools, hospitals, manufacturing centers focused on civilian goods rather than weapons of war. The humans hadn't just defeated their enemy, they had invested in transforming them into something better. Dr. Maria Santos, the chief administrator of the rehabilitation program, guided Zethkar through the facility. Her background was in xenopsychology, but her current role required skills no university could teach: the ability to help an entire warrior culture find new meaning in peace. The key insight, she explained as they observed former hegemony officers attending classes in conflict resolution, is that most of these individuals weren't inherently evil. They were products of a system that taught them conquest was the only path to security and prosperity. Our job is to demonstrate that cooperation achieves both more effectively. They paused at a workshop where human technicians were teaching former hegemony engineers how to convert military production facilities into civilian manufacturing centers. The collaboration was remarkable. Species that had been killing each other 6 months ago now worked together to solve complex technical problems. How do you overcome generations of indoctrination? Zethkar asked, watching a former hegemony general carefully assembling components for a medical scanner under the guidance of a human instructor. By proving that our way works better than their way, Santos replied. General Korvac there was one of their most effective military strategists. He spent 30 years believing that strength came from the ability to dominate others. Now he's learning that true strength comes from the ability to heal others. She showed Zethkar the production statistics displayed on the wall. The facility was already producing medical equipment, educational technology, and infrastructure components at a rate that exceeded the planet's pre-war military production. More importantly, the goods being produced were improving life for both former hegemony citizens and refugee populations from worlds the hegemony had previously conquered. This is our answer to the galaxy's question about human intentions, Santos continued. We don't conquer, we don't subjugate. We transform. When we're finished here, this world will be more prosperous, more secure, and more capable of contributing to galactic civilization than it ever was under the hegemony. Their tour was interrupted by an urgent communication from Admiral Vasquez. Ambassador Zethkar, we need you back aboard the Indomitable immediately. We have a situation developing that requires your expertise. Within an hour, Zethkar found himself back in the familiar war room, but the atmosphere was dramatically different from his previous visits. The displays showed not human military operations, but something far more complex, a galactic crisis that threatened to undo everything they had achieved. The Syndicate has made their move, Vasquez explained, highlighting a region of space far from former hegemony territory. While we were focused on dismantling the hegemony, they've been quietly absorbing smaller civilizations through economic manipulation and political subversion. The tactical displays showed a disturbing pattern. The Syndicate, a loose alliance of corporate entities from multiple species, had used the chaos following the hegemony's defeat to expand their influence dramatically. Unlike the hegemony's direct military conquest, the Syndicate used debt, resource manipulation, and political corruption to control entire systems. Commander Walsh pointed to the affected regions. They're not technically violating any galactic laws. Everything they're doing is legal, under current trade regulations. But the result is the same as conquest. Entire populations losing their freedom and autonomy. What makes this worse, added Chief Intelligence Officer Reyes, is that they're using our success against the hegemony as cover. They're telling governments that they need Syndicate protection because traditional military defenses are obsolete in the face of human capabilities. Zethkar studied the data with growing alarm. They're creating a situation where species feel they must choose between human military protection and Syndicate economic security. Exactly. And they're betting that we won't intervene because their methods are subtle rather than overtly aggressive. They think we'll only respond to direct military threats. Admiral Vasquez turned to face Zethkar directly. The question is whether they're right. Our doctrine is always focused on responding to direct threats to human lives or territory. But what happens when the threat is more indirect? When entire civilizations are being enslaved through legal mechanisms rather than military force? Before Zethkar could respond, Communication Officer Park interrupted. Admiral, priority transmission from Earth. The President wants to speak with you directly. The holographic display activated to show President Elena Rodriguez in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by her senior advisors. Her expression was grim but determined. Admiral, I've been briefed on the syndicate situation. What's your assessment? Madam President, we're facing a type of threat our current doctrine wasn't specifically designed to handle. The syndicate is achieving the same results as military conquest through economic warfare. Entire populations are losing their freedom, but there are no direct attacks on human interests. President Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. I've been consulting with our allies and partners throughout the galaxy. The consensus is clear. If we allow the syndicate to succeed through economic manipulation, we'll face a threat that's potentially more dangerous than the hegemony ever was. She paused, consulting notes from her advisors. I'm authorizing Operation Economic Justice. You're to develop a comprehensive response to the syndicate threat, using whatever methods are necessary to restore autonomy to affected populations. Admiral Vasquez straightened. Rules of engagement, Madam President? No direct military action unless they initiate violence. But I want you to demonstrate that humanity can protect galactic freedom through economic and political means just as effectively as we protect it through military action. As the transmission ended, Zethkar realized he was about to witness something unprecedented in galactic history. A species using their military capabilities to support economic warfare rather than traditional combat. Commander Walsh activated a series of displays showing human economic and industrial capabilities. The syndicate's power comes from their control of critical resources and trade routes. Our advantage is that human industrial capacity now exceeds anything else in the galaxy. The scope of what she revealed was staggering. During the centuries of preparation for potential military conflict, humanity had also developed economic capabilities that dwarfed most galactic civilizations combined. Not just raw production, but sophisticated systems for resource management, technology transfer, and rapid deployment of infrastructure. Phase 1, Walsh continued, involves establishing alternative supply chains for every critical resource the syndicate controls. We're not trying to compete with them economically. We're making their economic control irrelevant. The displays showed human cargo vessels already en route to systems under syndicate influence. But these weren't simple supply runs. Each ship carried complete industrial packages, manufacturing equipment, resource processing facilities, and technical expertise that would allow affected worlds to become economically independent. Phase 2 involves demonstrating the superiority of cooperative economic models over exploitative ones. Every world that breaks free from syndicate control will become more prosperous than they were under syndicate influence. Zethkar watched in amazement as the human economic plan unfolded. They weren't trying to replace the syndicate as controllers of galactic trade. Instead, they were creating a network of economically independent worlds that could trade freely without being vulnerable to manipulation. The genius of it, Admiral Vasquez explained, is that we're using the same principles that guided our military operations. We're not destroying the syndicate's economic power, we're making it irrelevant by creating better alternatives. Over the following weeks, Zethkar observed the implementation of Operation Economic Justice with the same fascination he had felt watching human military operations. The precision and coordination were identical, but instead of ships carrying weapons, they carried manufacturing equipment, educational resources, and technical expertise. The first results came from the Altarian system, where the syndicate had gained control through debt manipulation. Within 30 days of human economic intervention, Altair had not only paid off their debts but achieved higher productivity than they had ever experienced under syndicate management. But what impressed Zethkar most was the human approach to the syndicate personnel themselves. Rather than treating them as enemies to be defeated, humans offered employment opportunities that allowed former syndicate operatives to use their skills in ways that helped rather than exploited other species. We learned from our experience with the hegemony, explained Dr. Bayer Santos, who had been reassigned to oversee syndicate rehabilitation programs. The individuals working for these organizations aren't necessarily evil. They're often just trying to survive in systems that reward predatory behavior. Our job is to create systems that reward cooperative behavior instead. The transformation was remarkable. Former syndicate traders became coordinators for interspecies commerce. Former resource manipulators became efficiency experts helping worlds optimize their production. Former political operators became mediators, helping resolve disputes between different civilizations. 6 months after the beginning of Operation Economic Justice, the syndicate had effectively ceased to exist as a threat, not because they had been destroyed, but because they had been absorbed into a more effective economic system that served everyone better than exploitation had served the few. The final test came when the hegemony successor states, now fully rehabilitated and economically stable, requested membership in the emerging cooperative trade network. Former enemies were asking to become partners in the system humans had created. Standing in the same council chambers where he had first witnessed humanity's declaration of war, Zethkar now watched Ambassador Chen present the results of both military and economic operations to the galactic community. The transformation in the chamber's atmosphere was profound. Where once there had been fear and uncertainty, now there was hope and genuine cooperation. The past year has demonstrated something crucial about galactic security, Chen told the assembled delegates. Military force alone cannot create lasting peace. Economic prosperity alone cannot guarantee freedom. But when military capability is combined with economic cooperation and genuine commitment to the welfare of all species, we can achieve something unprecedented in galactic history. The holographic displays showed the current state of the galaxy. Former hegemony worlds were now productive partners in galactic civilization. Former syndicate territories were economically independent and thriving. The network of cooperative relationships had expanded to include more than 2/3 of all known species. This is humanity's gift to the galaxy, Chen continued. Not our weapons, not our technology, but our approach to solving problems. We don't seek to dominate or control. We seek to create conditions where every species can achieve their full potential in cooperation with others. Chancellor Mordek stood to address the assembly. Ambassador Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I want to express our profound gratitude for humanity's leadership during this crisis. But I must ask, what happens now? How do we maintain this cooperation without constant human intervention? Chen smiled, and Zethkar recognized the expression of satisfaction that came with the job well done. Chancellor, the beauty of what we've created is that it doesn't require human control to function. Every species in the cooperative network now has the tools and knowledge to maintain their own security and prosperity. Our role is simply to ensure that no future aggressor can threaten that stability. She gestured to the displays showing human military forces in their current positions. Human fleets will remain stationed throughout the galaxy, but not as occupiers or controllers. We're the immune system of galactic civilization, dormant when everything is healthy, but ready to respond immediately to any threat to the body politic. As the session concluded, Zethkar found himself reflecting on everything he had witnessed. He had seen humanity transform from a relatively minor species into the dominant force in galactic affairs, but they had done so in a way that elevated everyone rather than subjugating anyone. The ancient records had spoken of humanity with fear because they described a species that could not be conquered, could not be intimidated, and would not accept any threat to their survival. What the records had failed to capture was that this same unwillingness to accept threat extended to threats against any species they considered worthy of protection. Standing on the observation deck of the Indomitable, looking out at a galaxy more peaceful and prosperous than it had been in recorded history, Zethkar finally understood the full meaning of the human approach to warfare. They didn't fight to win. They fought to transform, and when they were finished fighting, both their enemies and their allies were better off than they had been before the conflict began. This was why the galaxy trembled when humanity went to war. Not from fear of destruction, but from the recognition that when humans decided change was necessary, that change would be so thorough and so beneficial that the entire structure of galactic civilization would be elevated to a higher level. As he watched human ships departing for new missions, some carrying aid to developing worlds, others transporting former enemies to new opportunities, still others standing ready to defend the peace they had created, Zethkar realized that the galaxy's greatest fortune was not that humans preferred peace. The galaxy's greatest fortune was that when humans went to war, they fought for a vision of peace that was better than anything that had come before. When humanity went to war, I finally knew why. The galaxy trembles. HFY sci-fi story.